Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday, November 6th, which just reminded me it's my nephew's birthday. Got to call him afterwards. Don't let me forget, mods. How are we all doing today? I'm John Arvosis here in Washington, D.C. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine and also lately the latest news from Israel, although there's a lot more Ukraine news tonight than Israel-Gaza news. As always, let me get TikTok rolling here on my iPad. And in the meantime, if you guys want to, get my microphone ready for TikTok. If you want to introduce yourself, say where you are from. Well, I am getting TikTok rolling. Here we go. Microphone for TikTok. Boom. There we go. Anyway, another glorious, warm or decently warm day in DC. We've been having ridiculously unseasonable weather, but it's great. Why not? Just very strange. Okay, got to change my title here. Hang on. Got it for my coffee talk this weekend. War update. Anyway, there we go. Boom. Go live. There we go. Hey, Steven. Hey, guys. Anyway. As always, we'll wait a minute or two before we start to let folks kind of adjust my computer. So let folks kind of join us and all. My allergy, my nose will itch because so what else is new? Back on time. Yes, the time change finally shifted in America. Finally, we were late and crazed, and thank you, Mark, for the hearts. Our time, we have to do everything differently. So, yes, our time changed this weekend, so all is normal. Thank you, Shane. So all is back to normal now. So, woo-woo. Anyway, so I went to the zoo today to see the pandas. Thank you, Elizabeth. We have, pandas at the National Zoo here in Washington that the Chinese are taking back, which I think is a really stupid move by the Chinese. They're not extending the stay. I guess it's some kind of bitchy Chinese thing or something, but they're taking the pandas back. And I think it's just really stupid of them. Thank you, Succeed and Chazak. Because think about it. I mean, first of all, it's good publicity. So they call it soft power for, thank you, Jeremy, for the Chinese to have the pandas here, but then to take them back, then everyone goes, thank you, Ava, Richard, because seeing the pandas at the National Zoo here in Washington is a big deal. And now people are going to go, where are the pandas? And they're going to say, well, the Chinese took them back. It's like, thank you, Crazy American. It went from positive diplomacy for China to negative diplomacy. They took their pandas back. I think kind of obnoxious, Anyway, so not very happy. Yeah, but I will say, but this was the only time I've ever visited the zoo when the pandas actually, you could see. I mean, they were out in the sun. I don't think I've got on I have beautiful videos on my camera, but I didn't get the pandas. I did get wonderful video of this mama gorilla and her baby that were just, I'll show you anyway, but it was just wild. They've got a new baby gorilla at the zoo. And it was just amazing, just sitting there playing. And it was just the cutest thing. Yeah, very neat. But I was very upset. The panda, unfortunately, we did get to see the pandas, but the pandas are gone. Anyway, welcome, folks. I'll get rolling here. So welcome, everybody. I'm John Arvosis. Hello, Kronos. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., and we talk about the latest news from Ukraine and the latest news. Exactly. We'll do zoo updates too. The latest news from the war in Israel and Gaza as well. The way the show works is I go through the news that I think matters for the day. Then we do question and answer, comments, whatever you guys want. Thank you, Cassandra. Also, if you want to ask a question immediately, you may go to, those were babies. Those weren't chimpanzees. Oh, Trumpansies, cute Gunther. And if you want to ask a question immediately, you can go to YouTube and buy a super chat question on YouTube. You pay for those. It's a YouTube thing, but more than half, 70% of the proceeds actually go to the creator, which is nice. And I will always, as a thank you, respond immediately to any of the YouTube questions. So thanks for that. And super stickers, of course. And finally, thank you, Pedro. Of course, TikTok being TikTok, by the way. TikTok has changed the gifts again. So now the gifts pop up in a smaller letter because some idiot 23-year-old. I'm going to write a book someday about engineers for tech companies and how they're all kids and they don't know what the hell they're doing. TikTok just updated their font. So whenever you guys buy me the nice gift, your name pops up at the top with letters half as big as the rest of the letters on the screen. So they're impossible to read if you're over 40. If they're over 40, you will not be able to. Wait, what? Okay, I will stop with the screen right here, but anybody who's over 40 knows what I'm talking about, okay? Imagine your normal screen. Some idiot took the most important part and said, let's make the letters half as small. Let's make them twice as small. For the most important part of the screen, everyone over 40 knows exactly what I'm talking about. All right, I'm going to move on. But anyway, so I will try to thank you for the gifts, but they're really small, but I think I can read them. So yeah, please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and YouTube, guys. As always, I do this for free. I do it full time. And basically the way I'm able to afford doing this is all your guys' generous gifts. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Addie New. I'm literally going, Addie New. Thank you, guys. So please do keep the gifts coming. Thanks, Kronos. All right, let me get rolling here. So I know I am 30 at heart. Thank you. Hey, thank you, Timothy. So I'm going to start with Israel because there isn't that much news. Thank you, Joe. And then do Ukraine. We've got a lot more news about Ukraine actually than we do Israel today. But nonetheless, I'll talk about Israel and Gaza, and then we'll do Ukraine. So, I mean, overall, thank you, Remigius and Pam. Overall, not much has changed in Israel and Gaza. Civilians are still dying. Hamas is still firing missiles, like a lot at Israel. The latest count was around 9,000. The Israelis are still blowing the hell out of Gaza. Lots of civilians are dying. I don't trust the Gaza Health Ministry because it's Hamas, but it's obvious a lot of civilians are dying. Thank you, Livestar. Right? Not going to thank you, Pam. Not going to deny it. Thank you, James. There were a lot of protests. I'm giving you the summary, but I will go through some news. There were a lot of protests this weekend around the world. We had them in Washington. I don't think, well, okay. Here's the interesting thing about the protest, at least for Washington, because I live here in Washington, D.C. I've done national politics for almost 40 years now. So I know something about it. The protests in D.C., for example, they're going to help and they're going to hurt both. Thank you, Minda and Johnny. Help and hurt both. Now, I'm curious in other countries. Like, I don't know in France and other countries how these things hit. Thank you, JR and Ali. Appreciate actually, the combo is kind of fun with the two of them at the same time. Thank you, Selena. But in the U.S., at least, the protests were very effective at getting Biden's attention. They were sort of angry and big, like the ones in Washington. Thank you, Marcy. They will definitely get Biden's attention. They will worry Biden. Like, how many Democrats do these guys represent? Because they're very loud. They will not win over people in the middle. The protests were a bit scary for American protests. They were sort of screaming at the White House, like trying to get through the White House fence. Thank you, Popeye. No one does that. I mean, they were at the White House fence, the one that opens, with a crowd shaking it, trying to open it. No one does that in Washington. You don't do that at protests in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Lizard. I mean, you just don't. Thank you, Lizard. They got their hands with red paint and put it all over the White House fence. Not the fence, but the thank you, Alexander. The fence is metal, but then the metal goes into big blocks of like stone, and they put red all over the stone and painted it. One does not do that in Washington. You don't in Washington, D.C. Protests don't happen that way. When you see that as an American, those look like crazy protests you have in Europe. As an American, I'm saying, they look like crazy. They also look like crazy protests that you would have in the Middle East, to be honest. My point here, thank you, Aladdin, these protests, but I'm telling you at the same time, the protests will freak out Biden. I think they will. So I think they're effective in that way. Absolutely. The ones in the US, but they're also really great propaganda for Republicans, because a lot of these protesters look like crazy people as far as the screaming, the screaming and the blood and all that kind of crap. That's anyway, we'll see. But it was interesting. As I said, I think I don't think it's going to help them with Biden. It's not going to help them with U.S. politics overall, which is an issue with the public. Okay, the Israeli Defense Forces said it hit more than 450 Hamas targets and captured additional territory in Gaza in the last day, including a military compound. The Israeli forces have basically surrounded Gaza at this point. Gaza City, excuse me. Let me pull this up. So Gaza, as you know, southwestern Israel, Egypt down here's Gaza, Egypt down here, Israel here. The Israelis have invaded over here, cut across here, and pretty much cut Gaza in half, more or less here, I believe. I don't think it's further. It might be further down, but I don't think it is. I think it's here. And they're trying to circle Gaza City. This they're not touching as much. The southern area is the area where they've asked people to try to evacuate to if they can. And they've cut it off here now, the Israelis, but they have opened up a humanitarian passage for anybody who wants to go south. Now, it is true, the Palestinians say, and I think it's fair to say, for a lot of people, they're not sure where to go, right? I mean, again, if you told me I had to move 30 miles south or 20 or whatever it is, 10 miles south, I'd be like, where? Where am I supposed to go with, and especially if I had a family and kids. So I'm sympathetic to the Palestinian argument on that one. Having said that, the Israelis say, we're going to bomb this area. You need to go south or we're going to bomb it anyway. So, yet another one of those nice complicated issues we have here. Hamas is claiming 10,000 people have now been killed by the Israeli attacks. Having said that, Israel says that 9,000 rockets have been fired at Israel in the last 3 weeks. That gets interesting because 9,000 rockets will kill a lot more than 10,000 people if Israel didn't have the technology to stop it. Thank you, Aladdin. It's just, I think, important to keep in mind, and this is when that word both sides actually works. Both sides are doing things that should elicit concern, not just one side. A lot of shuttle diplomacy from the U.S. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been traveling around the Middle East and also Europe in the last couple days. He went to Turkey today, met with Turkish foreign minister. He also met with in a surprise meeting that nobody knew about with the Iraqi prime minister, prime minister this weekend for an hour in Baghdad. He also met on Friday with key Arab leaders and on Saturday in Jordan. He met with key foreign ministers from a number of the Arab countries. Blinken is basically pushing for a humanitarian pause. A lot of other people are pushing for a ceasefire. Thank you, Elizabeth. As I've told you guys before, quick sip of water and we'll talk about ceasefire versus humanitarian pause. A ceasefire is when, thank you, Jonathan, both sides stop fighting and the war is sort of frozen and we discuss peace and maybe the ceasefire can go on long term, right? You basically say, okay, stop fighting, let's talk. Thank you, Sam, I am. A humanitarian pause is when you say, we're not stopping this war, but for the next 3 days, let's stop fighting. Let's, you could say, let's stop fighting so that you can release hostages. I can let fuel come in. We can let the wounded leave. We can let humanitarian supplies come in. But you would basically pause the fighting. Thank you, Worley. Pause the fighting for a specific period of time, usually a short period. It could be hours. It could be just a few days for a specific purpose to accomplish letting supplies in, to accomplish letting wounded out, letting, like I said, letting hostages or the captives as well that Hamas is holding, or that is at least several thousand other foreigners that Hamas is refusing to let leave Gaza. Israel is saying, well, Israel and the U.S., I think the UK as well, are saying no to a ceasefire because we believe it benefits Hamas. A humanitarian pause, the problem with that is, well, for starters, I believe, a lot of the countries don't think a humanitarian pause goes far enough. So you've got like the Russians opposing it, the Chinese opposing it, the Arab countries opposing it, right? They want a ceasefire. The second problem is Netanyahu, I believe, the Israeli prime minister, has said that he doesn't want a humanitarian pause unless, thank you, Kankaranga, unless the Hamas is releasing the hostages, the 240 hostages, not just Israeli, mind you, right? We know that there's half of the hostages have foreign passports, and like 20% of the hostages are Thai, from Thailand of all things. But Netanyahu doesn't want to have any kind of a pause unless Hamas agrees to let go of the hostages. So it's not really going anywhere, but Blinken has been doing a lot of shuttle diplomacy in the last days, trying to push this. Biden talked to Netanyahu, I believe yesterday, either today or yesterday, I think it was yesterday, trying to get him to at least agree to the humanitarian pause again. And there was a weird, I don't know if I've got it down here. There was a weird a weird quote. Do I have it? Yes, I do have it here. Biden talked to Netanyahu, today, it was today, about the possibility of a tactical pause to allow for safe civilian departures from areas of ongoing fighting, according to a statement from the White House. The goal would also be to ensure assistance is reaching civilians in need. The problem is the White House didn't say that went anywhere. They simply said Biden talked to Netanyahu about this idea, didn't say Netanyahu agreed, meaning nothing probably happened as a result. A little more news. Oh, the Rafah crossing. So, I mean, this is good, pretty decently good news. Rafah is the crossing here between Gaza and Egypt. It had been closed like everything else. And they let more civilians cross and more humanitarian aid. Smaller numbers than before. I don't have the numbers in front of me, I don't think. Not totally. It was fewer than before. Basically, every day, the civilians coming out are not Palestinians. The civilians coming out are the 5,000 to 7,000, or among the 5,000 to 7,000 foreigners that are in Gaza that Hamas has basically been saying they're not going to let go. So they're keeping another 5,000 to 7,000 foreigners kind of as maybe not hostages, but certainly human shields, if you want to call it that, or bargaining chips. Before the last couple of days, there were around 300, 350 of those hostages or whatever, captives being released every day. The number dropped significantly this weekend. It closed for a couple hours, I think, too. The crossing opened up again. 93 trucks of humanitarian aid crossed on Monday. That's pretty good. The minimum that the humanitarian agencies have been asking for has been 100 humanitarian trucks a day. So 93 isn't bad in that regard. They probably need more to to really help people, but the minimum the agencies were saying was 100 trucks a day. So 93 is pretty good. Hamas, this was interesting. So Hamas's armed wing, thank you, who's that? Kronos, thank you, Kronos. Hamas's armed wing in Lebanon, it launched 16 missiles towards Israeli cities today. Now, this was a big deal. Hang on, see if I've got my Israeli map. Here's my Israel and region map. So you've got Israel in yellow, okay? Gaza's down here, right? West Bank is here, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. So you got southern Lebanon, which is in control of basically terrorists, in essence, Hezbollah, a terrorist group, and not the Lebanese government. Mixed in here is also some Hamas fighters as well. Well, the Hamas fighters have been fighting they've been firing, rockets and things across the border. Up until now, the sort of informal agreement was both the Israelis and the folks north of the border would only fire rockets within about 5 kilometers of the border, maybe 3 miles of the border. Well, today they fired a lot more. They fired down to Haifa, which is all the way down here. They've been sticking up here before. They fired all the way down to Haifa and some other places. And, the experts are saying this is a big deal because this is an escalation. And if they are starting to fight further down into Israel, Israel is going to respond much more forcefully to try to knock them out. But it also raises a little bit of that specter of a greater war starting between southern Lebanon, which again is controlled by terrorists, not the Lebanese government, unfortunately, but there's still a lot of Lebanese civilians there, so it's a mess. In southern Lebanon and northern Israel there. The U.S., this was interesting too. The U.S. military said a guided missile submarine has arrived in the Middle East. It was sent there for deterrence purposes, clearly to freak out Iran. The submarine is nuclear powered, but it does not carry nuclear weapons, at least from what I was able to find. It carries, what are they? They're ballistic missiles. No, wait, hang on. I've got the missiles here. What is this? Tomahawk cruise missiles. Yes. They carry Tomahawk cruise missiles, 154 Tomahawks, which are very powerful bombs and cruise missiles, very precise, difficult to shoot down. And the message there was really for Iran to see, we can blow the crap out of you if you start playing games. Don't. There was a photograph released by the U.S. military, thank you, John S., of the sub passing through the Suez Canal. So Egypt there, the Red Sea going up into the Mediterranean near Israel. So that was interesting. That's it for the Israeli news today. Like I said, there isn't much. I mean, there's a lot going on, but what's going on? They are nuclear capable. Yes, Jens. Jens was saying they're nuclear capable submarines. They are. They were, thank you, B-Flow Sports. They were, I believe, previously equipped with nukes, and they were refitted with Tomahawk cruise missiles from what I read. Yes, they were formerly ballistic missile submarines converted to fire Tomahawk missiles. I've got it in my notes. So you are correct, Jens. So yeah, I'm going to switch to Ukraine news in a second because, guys, there isn't any news coming out of Israel. It's still happening. I mean, they're still bombing the hell out of each other. Israel, the talk I would say today is still that Israel, maybe in the next day or two, may start to really move in by ground into Gaza. The problem is they've got to go through those tunnels. They've got to find the tunnels and they've got to clear out every tunnel. And it is painstaking work. It is very dangerous work. It's dangerous for the Israeli military, but it's also dangerous for the Gaza civilians. Thank you, Adventures, because the Hamas fighters, most of them are not going to actually be identifying themselves as Hamas. You know, by the rules of war, they're supposed to have a uniform. And remember how, like when we cover the Ukraine news, the Ukrainians. Thank you for the live star there, Alex. The Ukrainians will have the badge keeps changing colors. Thank you, Big John, but not a badge, but they wear like tape around their arm to identify themselves. And the colors changed a few times. I think it was blue, it was yellow. It's been a couple different things. That's part of the rules of war. You are supposed to identify yourself as a fighter so people know you're not a civilian in essence, right? Hamas is not going to be doing that in a lot of cases. It's going to be dangerous in terms of it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be bad for civilians. But this is, by the way, this is why, before I switch over to Ukraine, again, when I talk about how this issue is so difficult, and even with Israel trying to respond to Hamas, how it's not like there's great other solutions here. Thank you, Chris, because folks don't want Israel bombing. Thank you, Carol. But the alternative is Israel going in man by man, going through the tunnels and sweeping these guys out. Well, when they're sweeping out the tunnels and going slowly through the town, every civilian they see could be Hamas. Thank you, Chris. It could be a civilian. And now you're going to have deaths of civilians because people aren't going to know which is which. It's my point here isn't saying it's fine to kill the civilians, but I think there's going to be a lot of civilian deaths, and we're going to see the same problem pop up that we're having now, where all of a sudden people who said don't bomb, go in with your whatever otherwise, are now going to see going in otherwise is also going to kill a lot of civilians. So in any case, all right. I'm going to switch to Ukraine. Just remember, guys, please do keep the gifts coming. Thank you, Kronos, for the rose. Super chat, super sticker on TikTok, on YouTube, excuse me. The gifts on TikTok. I will always do the shout outs for the gifts when I see the bigger gifts on the screen. So please do keep them coming, guys. I appreciate them. They help support my work. And you can also do memberships as well. Remember, TikTok memberships, monthly memberships, where you pay each month a contribution. You can do it on YouTube, on Twitch, on Discord, on Ko-fi. Lots of different places. Thank you, Flower Lady. So lots of different ways. All right, let's jump into Ukraine. And then when we finish Ukraine, there's lots of Ukraine news. Thank you, 863 Tom. All right. So today is day 620. Thank you, Andre, Elizabeth, and Ellie, of day 620 of Putin's special 3-day military operation. Thank you, Timothy. There was an interesting overall update from Michael Clark, who's a defense analyst working with Sky News. And I wanted to just read you some of this because he did a really interesting, Michael Clark, I just like him a lot. He's one of you had turned me on to him. I forgot who it was of you. He's very good. And he did a really nice sort of summary of what was going on with the war in general with Ukraine and Russia. Listen to this. So he says, okay, first of all, Avdiivka. Okay, he gave a nice Avdiivka update. So Avdiivka is the battle we've been talking about a lot lately, over by Donetsk. Donetsk is a Ukrainian territory held by the Russians. You go sort of northwest, not very far though. It's like a few miles, like a couple kilometers. It's just not that far up. Is Avdiivka, kind of a suburb of Donetsk, and the Russians have been fighting like hell trying to take it from the Ukrainians. Now, a point that Michael Clark makes, which I had made to you guys before. Actually, I think I even did it with Vlad and with us on the weekend, maybe. But that Bakhmut in the east was more of a symbolic fight. It was kind of stupid, frankly, from the Russian perspective. They spent 11 months lots of men, lots of equipment they lost taking Bakhmut, which it's not really clear why Bakhmut matters, right? Whereas Avdiivka matters. I mean, Avdiivka itself is this sort of northern suburb of Donetsk, huge city in the east. The Ukrainians have moved right close to the main airport there, which would be huge to take in terms of blocking the Russians from getting supplies, but also the Ukrainians being able to bring in more supplies and more troops. And Clark goes on to say that Avdiivka is really the gateway to the south of Ukraine. The Ukrainians, he says, the Ukrainians have held Avdiivka since the start of the war, and if they lose it now, they'll be locked out of the south of Donbass. All that they've achieved further north, all those areas they fought really hard for in the autumn, will not count for very much if they lose the gateway to the south. So what he's talking about is basically, from his perspective, you've had a lot of wins over here that Ukraine had, pushing back against Kharkiv, and he's saying that if they lose this, it's going to block them from being able to move south from here. South and maybe a little bit east too. So anyway, hugely important. The Russians have poured a ton in there. They're not doing very well. They've had a ton of troops, a ton of weapons, not been going well, which is great. But the Ukrainians aren't really, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a stalemate, I would say, to some degree around Avdiivka. The good part is the Russians are on the offensive and they're not doing well. A little bit more here. He says the war is now in a war of attrition. He says attrition in war means that you struggle. You arm wrestle for a long time, until one side just crumbles and then things happen very quickly. So what he means is literally like an arm wrestle where you're closely matched, where you're going like this and you're not really going anywhere, but you're both expending a lot of energy and a lot of power, right? That's what a war of attrition is, in essence, is that you're like this, and at the same time you're doing this, you're not only getting really tired, but my troops are dying. Your troops are dying. My weapons are blowing up. Your weapons are blowing up, right? So both sides are weakening, so to speak, as there not much is happening, as he says, until all of a sudden something breaks and then one side just goes through, right? So that's a war of attrition. In this particular war, he says, the Russians are more likely to crumble at some point in the next 18 months than Ukraine is if Ukraine continues to be supported. That's interesting. Now, he's talking about the war overall. That struck me as interesting because we've been getting worried lately about the prospects of this becoming kind of a stalemate, or as he said, a war of attrition. And it wasn't necessarily clear that a stalemate helped Ukraine in the long term. He seems to think in the next 18 months, Ukraine still is in a better position than Russia. The other thing about attrition is that you only win battles of attrition if you industrialize warfare. This is the return of industrial war to Europe. We never thought we'd see this after the end of the Second World War. But wars of attrition are won, this is what he means by this, are won by the side that is most able to gear up its domestic industry and apply it to the battlefront for a relatively prolonged period. That may be a matter of 2 or 3 or 4 years. Although the Ukrainians accept that in their mind, they're still transiting really to a full war economy, meaning they haven't done it yet. The Russians are transiting to a full war economy, but they can't do it. So he's saying the Ukrainians are transitioning, but they haven't gotten there yet. The Russians have tried to get there and they can't. They failed. Again, very interesting on that perspective. Thank you, by the way, No One Fights Alone, for the new membership on YouTube. Appreciate that. A little bit more. He says the next 18 months will be crucial. I don't think that Russians can launch any successful offensive until the spring of 2025. Guys, he's talking a year and a half from now that the Russians, thank you, Chad, that the Russians will not be able to go on the offensive, right? Meaning a big attack like the Ukrainians at least attempted to do with this counteroffensive, right? They weren't very successful. Thank you, Chris. But the kind of big attack. Chili was saying why. If the why means why wouldn't they? Because the Russians have spent so many troops and so many men and so much so much weapons, equipment, tanks, artillery, etc. Fighting the Ukrainian counteroffensive. A couple things. One, the Russians had a big counteroffensive before the Ukrainian one. Nothing happened, right? Over the winter was the big Russian counteroffensive. Literally nothing happened. So they spent a ton of men and a ton of equipment. Then you've got the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Not much happening. I mean, some, but it still is costing the Russians a lot of men. Then the Russians went to northeastern Ukraine, remember? The Russians poured a ton of men and equipment up here near Kupiansk, and they were having some progress, but not a ton. And that cost them a lot of men and weapons. The Russians are at the point now where they've pretty much spent, they've got weapons and men, but they've spent a lot of their weapons and men that he's saying it's going to take them a year and a half to build up their capacity again, where they can be able to do another big punch to Ukraine. Let me just see here. During the next year, the Ukrainians do have an opportunity of making a couple of big breakthroughs, which might then be the basis for some favorable ceasefire talks. That was his final point. He feels that right now, Putin is not ready for a ceasefire talk, but also, Ukraine isn't in a position. Well, it's the same argument. Ukraine isn't really in a position where they've got anything that Putin wants, right? So that Putin kind of looks and goes, well, I've got 4 territories more or less, four, and then Crimea, and the 4 I don't have 100%, but I'm still holding on to pretty well. So what? If Ukraine is able to have some big breakthroughs, like for example, reach the coast here, so they're able to cut the Russian occupation in half, reach the coast, and then blow up the Kerch Bridge. And now all of a sudden, you've got Crimea, especially in kind of a bad situation. Now Putin, a little bit more interesting in terms of negotiating. Anyway, that's what's up with all of that. Zelensky this weekend disagreed with his top general, Zaluzhny, who had come out in a Economist interview last week that I had read portions of to you guys. Zaluzhny said, good guy, I believe. People seem to like him. Their top general, that he believes the war is in a stalemate at this point. And he nicely blamed the fact that it didn't help that NATO's weapons took forever to get there, et cetera. This was good news from Ukraine. The brand new Russian Askald cruise missile carrier. So this was a ship the Russians had for cruise missiles in Crimea near the town of Kerch, actually, which Kerch is right here. The Kerch Bridge goes across the sea here to Russia. Kerch Bridge, the one the Ukrainians keep trying to blow up. The Kerch Bridge goes from the town of Kerch. The town of Kerch has a shipyard. The Ukrainians attacked the Russian shipyard, we believe, with cruise missiles, and we believe they might have even been the French cruise missiles, the Scalp, which are the cruise missiles that the French and the British created together. The British version is called Storm Shadow. The French version is called Scalp. Thank you, Ellie, for the hearts. So we believe that they used cruise missiles, and from what we were seeing today, it is possible that the ship was damaged beyond repair, which is great because it's a new cruise missile ship. So, it's one ship, but it's a good ship, and it looks like the Ukrainians got it, which is great. Ukrainian military said today they believe, and this was something I'd mentioned before too, that the Russians are waiting for the temperature to drop below 0. They use Celsius, so by 0 they mean below freezing. Before launching mass strikes on Ukraine's energy system. So that was something we were talking about. Last week, some observers were noting, thank you, Richard, some observers were noting that the Russians were not sending the kind of missiles they normally do at Kyiv, for example, the Ukrainian capital. The numbers had decreased significantly for about a month now. And the concern is that they were basically saving their, one concern was possibly that they were saving the missiles and planning on using them all at once in some massive strike over some massive strike, that's good. Sorry, I'm looking here a comment on TikTok. Not Your Mama says, I'm watching your videos and I can't tell what you support. That's good. I'm glad to hear it. Good. See? Thank you. I'm sure you didn't mean it that way, but that's the best compliment I've had all day. All right. A little more here. Oh, this was really bad. There was a horrible attack this weekend in Ukraine. This was idiotic, absolutely idiotic by the Ukrainians. And Zelensky's pissed, doing a criminal investigation now. Thank you, Eddie New. But the Ukrainian military decided to hold an award ceremony for its troops. They got all of their troops, a lot of their troops together in one place. I believe they might have even been outside. I'm not sure. I thought they might have been outside. And what do you think the Russians did? The Russians found out that the Ukrainians stupidly put all their troops in one place and they bombed it. They killed 19 or 20 at least. Thank you, Rainbow. 19 or 20 at least of the Ukrainian troops and injured a lot more. This is the kind of stupid thing the Russians do. It's the kind of stupid things bingo. D. Lyle says, didn't the Russians do that? Yep. The Russians did it. The Russians did it several times, but they did it most famously New Year's of last year when Putin was giving his New Year's address at midnight. And the idiot Russian commanders said they made all the troops get together in their barracks together to watch Putin's speech. They made them. So they got hundreds of the troops in like a dormitory together. And of course, the Ukrainians blew it up and killed them all. And of course, the Russians being Russians, they also had ammunition stored either in the basement of the dormitory or literally in trucks right outside the dormitory. Thank you, Liv. So of course, the explosion also blew up the ammunition and it blew up even more of the soldiers. So yes, this is the kind of stupid thing the Russians do. And there's now a criminal probe going on in Ukraine as to what the hell happened, because it's a very stupid thing that the Ukrainian general, whoever coordinated this. Russian losses. There were some significant Russian losses, it seems, in Vuhledar. Vuhledar is also eastern Ukraine. Around Donetsk, we've been talking about Avdiivka, which is like right north of Donetsk, right northwest. Vuhledar is right southwest, okay, of Donetsk. So same area, more or less. The Russians have been really hot to take that area too. Again, poured in a bunch of troops, a bunch of vehicles, and they got destroyed. This happened in the last few days. Ukrainian military bloggers said Russia had suffered heavy losses in a failed armored assault in the area, losing multiple tanks. And by the way, there was video showing multiple Russian tanks on fire, which is great. Thank you for the ghost there, Kronos. At least 10 tanks, troops, and combat vehicles were confirmed to have been destroyed by Ukraine, the blogger said. That's good news, at least. I mean, so what's interesting is, actually, although to some degree this is a war of attrition, the war is still going on, right? We're just not getting a big change in territory or anything, but you are still getting some successful Ukrainian strikes. So, let's see. Sweden, this was a weird thing. So Blinken was in Turkey today. I mentioned during the Israeli part of our show, or the Israel-Gaza news, that Blinken was in, thank you to TBI, Chris, that Secretary Blinken, our Secretary of State, was in traveling the Middle East this weekend, and he went to Turkey to meet with the Turkish foreign minister. One of the things he brought up was the Sweden joining NATO. We are still waiting for the Turks to vote in their parliament on whether they're going to let Sweden join NATO or not. Hang on a second here. This is weird. He meets with the Turkish foreign minister, and Blinken says he's convinced that we'll see forward movement soon. I don't know what that means. Forward movement is weird, right? If you were convinced, thank you, Martin, the Turks were going to approve Sweden soon, you'd say, I'm convinced Sweden will be approved soon. You wouldn't say, I'm convinced we will see forward movement. Forward movement means the committee is going to discuss it in the Congress or the parliament or whatever, right? I mean, it's just sort of like, okay, whatever. So let's see. I'm not convinced. Ukraine has launched, this is good. Ukraine has launched mass production of kamikaze drones with a maximum range of 1,000 kilometers. It is doing it in cooperation with foreign partners, whoever they are. And the Ukrainian military is already ordering the drones. 1,000 kilometers is 600 miles. So that's really good. 600 miles, by the way, is Moscow. So very interesting mass production, which would be great because we're getting concerned that the Russians also have been establishing new factories to begin mass production of drones as early as possibly January. An assistant of Ukraine's commander-in-chief Zaluzhny, the general I was telling you about, the top general, was killed by an explosive device in his home. That there was a little blurb of a story. I hear that, and okay, it's either someone domestic, like there's some domestic squabble, or the Russians did it, and it's very interesting that one of his assistants is getting blown up in his home. It kind of feels like it's the Russians. Kind of freaky. An assistant to General Zaluzhny, who's the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces. Wagner training, Kadyrov, quick little story about Kadyrov with the Chechens, claims he's now doing joint training with the remaining Wagner troop guys, the Wagner group. And I find that very weird because the Wagner guys were very good. They're war criminals, but they're good at what they do. The Chechens, not so much, right? And the Chechens are famous. They call them TikTok warriors because the Chechens with Kadyrov, they love to put, they're very scary Muslim fighters. That's like their shtick. And they put videos up of them praying and the Islamic music and fighting. And it's supposed to create this otherworldly, they're trying to play on this. I don't even know what it is. They're trying to play on something. Well, everyone calls them TikTok warriors because that's all they do. They put out videos. They did it again. They announced that they're training with Wagner. And I mean, Wagner has no need to train with the Chechens. Kadyrov put out a video with stirring music showing soldiers in combat training, including some wearing Wagner insignias and masks over their faces. It's like, okay. Thank you, Joe, for the duck. Slovakia's prime minister, the one who's anti-Ukraine and pro-Putin, said that his government will not prevent arms sales from Slovak countries to Ukraine. I mean, that's good at least. France's oldest arm manufacturer has signed a $38 million contract to supply Ukraine with assault rifles and sniper rifles and grenade launchers. Zelensky offered Donald Trump to visit Ukraine to learn about the conflict. I'm going to stop with that. Like I said, there were a lot of Ukraine stories, nothing earth-shattering, but interesting. Not as much Israel. We've got our auctions for this week. As you guys may know, we do auctions. Thank you, Annie. I didn't see your gift earlier. Appreciate that. We do auctions every Wednesday over on Discord. We got a Discord community, discord.aravosis.com. And we do auctions there of cool stuff I get from Ukraine. And 50% of the money we channel back into Ukraine. 50% of the money I use to support my work because I do this full time and I'm able to afford to do this full time covering Ukraine and now Israel because of your guys' gifts and the auctions and things. So we've got a lot of cool auction stuff. I will just show you a couple, but you can go over to discord.aravosis and we're doing questions next. I have to do a quick little pitch for my stuff because that's how I'm able to do the show. So, 786, you have no idea the real jobs I've had. You might want to look at my LinkedIn. You're going to be embarrassed. All right. So very cool hand-painted Christmas ornaments from Ukraine. I know he's gone, Ash. I just figured I always like when they do stuff like that. I'm like, oh, you can go read my resume. Very cool hand-painted Christmas ornaments from Ukraine. I mean, I kind of like that. I mean, I like red, but I kind of like the larger. The larger ones are 5 inches. The smaller ones are 4 inches. 5 inches is like 12 centimeters or so. The ornaments are so. Oh, your ornament did come. Yay. Excellent. With the new boxes. And then this sort of, actually, this one's almost kind of a brownish red, but very pretty as well. This one's neat because it's got a Cossack, like riding a horse or a horse of some kind. And then on the back is Christmas greetings, the town she's from, 2023. But anyway, a lot of these, they're very cool. A couple other little things. I can't remember. My problem here, I literally can't remember week to week which auctions I'm doing. It drives me a little crazy here, guys. Let me look here. Right, the ornaments. Oh, the butterfly ornament. Okay, I thought so. This is one of my favorites. This woman does insanely beautiful work. This is the Petrikivka style. That is absolutely gorgeous. It's a butterfly Christmas ornament. It's the same on both sides. Just absolutely stunning work. So this is very pretty. Got a couple other things. Actually, this I love because this one I was showing you guys before. This is a piece of the outdoor light to a Russian MTLB. So is it like an armored person? Actually, it's amphibious personnel carrier. And this is one of the outdoor lights. The light goes in here. It's cool too, because it's got the Russian writing on it, GST, which is very cool. And I've got a picture of the actual vehicle that this came from with the piece. And you can see one of the other lights still on the vehicle. It's very cool. But anyway, we're auctioning this off just as it was a trophy, so to speak, from a Russian vehicle destroyed in Ukraine. And we know where. I've got the town written down near Kharkiv. I'm forgetting the exact name, but we've got the town, and I think I'll call it quits with that. There's a lot more stuff, guys. We've got a lot of really cool stuff. Go check it out. Well, the Ukrainians call it a trophy. The Ukrainians use the word trophy to mean, thank you, Lori, Russian equipment that they've shot down. and then gotten pieces of to, as a souvenir. They call them trophies. Yeah. I know the first time I saw it, I was like, trophy, but that's what they call it. Yep. All right, guys, let's do questions and answers. Spoils of war. Exactly. Questions and answers, etc. All right. What do you got? So yeah, we'll do Israel. Do you think Israel military got stalled as Hamas planted mines and attacking from tunnels? Who knows? We're not hearing that. I think the thing is, my point is, I don't think there's evidence of a stall. We knew for Israel to go in was going to be very difficult going into Gaza because Hamas is in the tunnels and because there's so many civilians, right? And going street to street is very dangerous and very difficult in any kind of war setting, right? So we knew Israel was going to basically bomb first to try to take out the tunnels, take out the headquarters, the weapons, et cetera, to the extent they could, and then go in street by street. Well, even less, because tunnel by tunnel. So I don't think, thank you, Alex. I don't think anything has been slowed down. I don't think anybody's looking at this and thinking, oh, Israel had already wanted to invade, but with their ground troops and blah, 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 and they're not doing it yet in the center of town. I just don't think that's been the thinking yet. Because if anything, people think, oh my God, this bombing campaign has been too much, killing too many civilians, right? It's not sort of perceived as any kind of stalemate, really trollitic. But you raise a good point, which is the experts do think that it's going to be very difficult, very deadly on both sides, and very slow for the Ukrainians. I keep going Ukrainians. It's always switching topics. Thank you, Kronos. For the Israeli troops to go in and try to clear out those tunnels. It's going to be incredibly difficult, including the fact that they won't be able to recognize who's Hamas and who's a civilian. So it's just going to be that's going to be slow. That's going to be very slow. I don't see this war ending anytime soon. No. I mean, the problem with ending this war, and this is the problem, again, I go back to my training in foreign policy where I was trained to basically, we took sides and we ran, I'm trying to think how to even phrase this. We ran simulations. Like one of the trainings we did, I was the North Korean leader during the North Vietnamese leader during the Vietnam War. And, we basically prepared ourselves with kind of the status quo. What was influencing each leader? What did they care about? What didn't they care about? What did they fear? What didn't they fear? Right. And you figured out what made that person tick and what didn't make that person tick. And you kind of had to apply. And then we also, for example, just figuring out U.S. policy on various issues. We had to go through and figure out, okay, what would the State Department think? What would the Defense Department think? What would the White House think? Right. And actually, now that I've worked on the outside as well, because I was in school at that point, I also now, you have to think of the politics. Think about Biden and Gaza right now, right? Biden has to now think of the electoral politics, right? How much, thank you, Macab, how much am I pissing off Muslim Americans or Arab Americans, thank you, Amy, and their supporters? But he's also got to think, how much am I pissing off Jewish Americans and Israel supporters, which are actually an even bigger, more powerful bloc in this country? So anyway, my point is, when you're trying to figure out like what could end the war, you've got to think politically what could end the war. Palestine, the Palestinians, who are players? There's multiple players, right? There's the Palestinian people, there's Hamas, potentially Hezbollah. You've got the Palestinian Authority over in the West Bank. I mean, you've got to think of what's influencing each party, right? Palestinian Authority, probably more willing to reach an agreement, maybe, than Hamas itself, right? It's any case. So my point here is what I've always said. I don't know. I think it's going to be very difficult to reach some agreement. I know where I was going with this. The idea of a ceasefire, there's really no reason for Israel to do a ceasefire. That's the problem. It may sound good to lots of people around the world who don't want civilians to die. If you're Israeli, at least a lot of Israeli, I'm not going to speak for Israelis here, but I would think if you're Israeli, you look and go, these mofos want to wipe us off the planet. They've made that clear. They did the biggest attack since the Holocaust. We have to destroy Hamas. There's no ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, they're just going to come back in a month or two and do it again, right? So if you're Israeli, why would you do it? If you're an Israeli peace person, maybe you would want a ceasefire, okay? But if you're an Israeli sort of strategic defense person, you're going, this is crazy. I don't want a ceasefire. So the problem you get is you've got a lot of world consternation and scorn, okay? From maybe not from the US, maybe not from the UK, but from a lot of, but from, parts of our population, certainly in a lot of other countries. But what will make Israel want to agree to that if Israel's worried about getting wiped off the earth? And this is also where I go to the issue, which I think is important. This is where I go to the issue of the Holocaust and years of terrorism and everything else. If you're trying to get Israel to do something, you've got to keep in mind then what is motivating Israelis. And if I were, again, I'm not Israeli and I'm not Jewish, so fair enough. I'm not as close to the issue. But I've been following this stuff for years and I care about it. If you're Israeli, you're thinking, you literally are thinking existentially. You're literally thinking people have been trying to wipe us off the face of the earth for thousands of years, and 100 years ago, they almost did it, right? Remember, 40% of the world's Jews were killed in the Holocaust, okay? That's what's important. 40% of all of them were killed. If you're Israeli, you're going, screw it, right? I mean, that's what makes this difficult. That's what makes this difficult to resolve, because from their perspective, they're going to get wiped. They're a small country. They're powerful, but they're small, and they're going to get wiped out. And therefore, they don't want to just compromise and whatever. I don't know what the solution. I'm saying I don't know what the solution is. I mean, no, that's not true. The solution is going back to where we were years ago and finding some kind of a solution where you split up the land somehow. The problem is you now know that you also have to split up the land in a way that the crazies don't come in, right? What do you do with the crazies? Because if you create a two-state, you need to make sure people like Hamas don't come back and just arm themselves again and attack you, right? Just because you create a Palestinian state doesn't mean Hamas and these bad guys aren't going to keep doing what they're doing. So that's still a wrinkle, but it's not easy. But then again, we've almost had peace several times, so there's still a chance. You just have to have the right leaders that want to do it. You have to have the right leaders that want to do it, and that's its own problem on all sides, really. Anyway, I mean, it is a vicious circle, but they almost did it once or twice, even a couple times, right? So it's possible, It's possible. Otan Bot says, thank you, Dark Irish. Oh, I don't know. Have we seen you in a while? I don't remember if we have. Maybe. Gunther, Gunther. Otan Bot says, what are the chances of this conflict escalating and more parties getting involved? I mean, as I've said before, I think the possibility of more parties getting involved is the U.S., right? The U.S. is putting a lot of weapons there to hopefully prevent other parties getting involved. I think we are there primarily for Iran. And we moved a nuclear powered, a conventional weapon, Tomahawk cruise missile submarine in place to tell Iran, we will blow the crap out of you if you get involved in this war. And hopefully it'll keep Iran out. That I think is the biggest risk. The other big risk is Hezbollah, which is southern Lebanon, attacking anyway. Now, they could still do it and say, the Iranians didn't make them do it, so that Iran gets off the hook, but that's still a danger. I mean, I don't see the Russians doing it necessarily, getting involved as much. I don't know. But I do see there's the danger of us getting involved in fighting and stuff, at least from afar with missiles and planes, not on the ground, Anyway. Well, that's an interesting question. Sen says, what is further U.S. involvement due to our national security on a global level? Depends. I mean, it depends. The State Department types, thank you, Maddie. This is where, again, it kind of depends how you approach things, okay? If you are somebody that worries about diplomacy, okay, Miss Super Chat from who? Hang on here. Oh, Annika, didn't see that. Sorry about that. Let me answer that and I'll get Annika's. Thank you for that, guys. Thank you. If you're somebody who worries a lot about diplomacy, the U.S. is taking a lot of hits diplomatically, and people are getting mad at us. If you're somebody who thinks strategically, I'm not sure you care, right? I mean, devil's advocate, why do I care? Arabs in the street don't like us, so what? And again, I'm being devil's advocate here, but I mean, so what, right? I mean, they don't like us anyway, right? Africa, they don't like us much anyway. I mean, like, I'm not sure strategically. You could argue strategically, the U.S. is showing support for an ally and showing, just like with Ukraine, that they're going to be there. So that once again, China, arguably, thinking about Taiwan, is going, you know what? Not only was America willing to stand up for Ukraine with lots of weapons, America's already stressed out a little bit in terms of their weapons, and now they're standing up for Israel too. You know, America has said they will stand up for Taiwan as well. If we the Chinese attack Taiwan, maybe they're not kidding, right? Russians, it's also showing the Russians. So I mean, U.S. security around the world, you could argue this helps, but I will say, but the State Department types think it hurts. They think it's hurting the U.S.'s reputation and everything else. It just comes down to whether you care about your reputation. I care about our reputation, but I'm not convinced 100% which way that, like Ronald Reagan didn't care about our reputation. You know, I can't say I was a Reagan fan about many things, but he didn't care. And he did a good job standing up to the Soviets, you know? So it depends. I mean, I would say Israel in some ways doesn't care about their reputation. In some ways. And again, it's because they're worried about dying, and they could be loved and dead or hated and alive from their perspective. I think they kind of figure, you know, so I don't know. It's a good question though. It's an interesting question. What else we got here? Oh, Annika. Thank you, Annika. I did not see it. I apologize for that. How long do you think it will continue to be a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine? I mean, you know, what is so difficult with this is that obviously everybody had high hopes on the counteroffensive, and we gave Ukraine, you know, a lot of weapons. Again, too late, I think. We gave everything to Ukraine too late, and therefore the Russians were able to dig in too much. So it was hard to dislodge them. But how do you replicate that? And if you do replicate it in a year or two with these weapons again, which I'm not sure we'll do, why will Ukraine win next time if they couldn't win? Meaning, if the counteroffensive couldn't break through this time, why will it break through next spring or something, right? Now, having said that, like what Michael Clark said at Sky News, you know, you do have the issue of the Russians are tired and weak, and maybe over the next 18 months, the Ukrainians could still push through. Basically, the Ukrainians are going slowly. They're not getting pushed back, but they're going slowly forward. Maybe if they're able to go just enough, it'll make a difference. But, you know, I worry now about what else we can do to make a difference. Now, we could give them, F-16s, more tanks, which we're not talking about. F-16s may not get there forever. Longer range missiles. Like the longer range missiles would have made a difference. We didn't send them, right? We held off on the shorter range of the missiles. We didn't only gave it to them a couple weeks ago, and we should have given it to them months ago. Right? They're making incremental gains, but it's very incremental, I would say, Colin. And by the way, we are only giving them incremental help, which is the problem as well. We are doing, but it's not just incremental. It's literally little slivers of help that we keep giving Ukraine more and more. I don't think we want them to win, guys. I really don't. This has been the contradiction from the beginning. Biden doesn't want them to, he doesn't want them to lose, but he doesn't want them to win. I've said it from the beginning, and he's getting his wish. You know, I don't know. I don't want to be negative, Annika, but I'm not really positive on what happens next, you know? But slow and steady could win. Annette says slow and steady usually wins the race. Ukraine will win the race. It can. It can though. It's possible because Ukraine does keep slowly advancing. You know, maybe they're able to pull this off. I certainly hope so. Going to keep supporting them. Sasha's awake. Look out. I'm putting out a fan in my room again. It got warm again today. Any change to the grain situation? Not really. Trump, we can talk about Trump at the end. We can do some election stuff at the very end if you want. It's a little weird though, but we'll jump at the very end. In a wake, Sasha, look out. Hello. She's on the carpet. She went like, what? Me? She was napping, and then actually you guys, the chair, I think the chair is in the way. You guys, maybe. No, she's walking around. She's walking around. She is walking around. Never mind. Although she may go for water. I may be in trouble if she goes for water. Kelly says Ukraine is increasing. Thank you, Kronos, for the gift. Ukraine is increasing their weapons manufacturing by 62%. Well, I mean, we know they're increasing the drone production, which is great. You know, there's that joint deal with Rheinmetall, the German producer, weapons producer. There's some other one I don't remember. Was it British? I don't remember. I think it was British. Wasn't it maybe? Kellum? I don't remember if there was a British weapons producer that was doing some joint venture with the Ukrainians as well. Oh God. All right. Wait, the dog. I'm feeling guilty now. The dog needs water. All right. Remember, I'm her biatch. So 1 second. All right, you. It's a little early for this. It's a little early for this, right? Little early. Okay. All right. Hey, these are the things we do for our pets, you know? Well, she sits there and literally, she doesn't just start hitting the bowl. She goes, it's like, it reminds me of those mothers that say like when the baby cries and they just like, they're like, oh my God. I can't give her a full bowl of water because she drinks too much. Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah. Annette says, did you hear about the meetings Zelensky had with businessmen who want to invest in Ukraine before the war ends in order for them to then put pressure on Congress to maintain support for Ukraine? That's interesting. Oh, no, that is true, Kelly. I hadn't thought about that. You're right. It's 8:00 in Sasha time. You're right. This is the time I've always given her water and done her teeth by now. Totally didn't think of that. That probably is exactly what happened. That's interesting, though, Kelly. I mean, Annette, about the businessmen. It's not a dumb idea, actually. You make Ukraine a constituency in essence. It's very smart. Yeah. To get American businesses. Hey, Victoria. Well, Michael, I don't think it's in, Michael says a large population in the U.S. are protesting in support of Hamas. Why do you think that is? Some of them are in support of Hamas. Many of them are not. I will say, I think the protests are not thrilling me. You know, they're a little weird, but it's what okay. They're not the majority of Americans. In American public opinion, they're the minority. Okay. Support for Hamas or support for Palestinians is way less than support for Israel in America. It is. Even among Democrats, it is. But there's a sizable group, they're very loud, that supports the Palestinians over Israel or whatever you want to call it. I don't quite get, I was talking to a friend about this today. Thank you, Kronos. One thing I don't get is, and I saw somebody on Twitter mention this, he pissed somebody off, but it was an interesting observation. He was talking about Rashida Tlaib, who's the Democratic member of Congress, Palestinian, right? She's Palestinian. Yeah, I'm 99% sure she's Palestinian American. And she's been very upset about this. She's a socialist. She's to the left, but she's been very upset about all of this. And he tweeted, and he said, it was a good tweet, I think. He said, you know, with Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman, she's Palestinian American. I get why she's upset. I get why she's angry and very emotional about this issue, right? Because, you know, personal stake. I don't get, he said, all the people who have no connection to Palestinians, Palestine, the Middle East, or whatever. And I do find it a little weird. I mean, it's real, not weird. I don't quite understand it. We were talking about it today. I mean, again, privately, I've dealt with some people who have just been livid with me about these broadcasts. But I mean, angry. Like I had one person who was a regular who just left because she got angry at my broadcast. And I was like, and I don't quite get that because I care about this issue passionately, but there are several of you, hell, Callum's one of them, I'm going to name who I consider friends, and he disagrees with me on this. I don't hate Callum because and by the way, I feel very strongly about my beliefs on this because a lot of it is rooted in seeing anti-Semitism and seeing the way Jews have been treated and everything else. But so, I mean, I feel like I've got a little bit of personal stake, but I don't get angry at people who disagree because I also get that I get that this issue is complicated and I absolutely get why people would be on the other side, right? Like I get it. But I don't get why, like I said, why the protests seem rather big. And I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. I don't get it. I don't get it. And part of the reason I say I don't get it too is, you know, the Palestinians over there they're not our brothers and sisters in terms of politics. They're very conservative in terms of politics. The Arabs overall are very conservative in terms of politics. They hate, hey, that's enough for now. No. Oh, God. Kelly was right, or whoever said that. My dog is not used to the time change. So she's sitting here and thinks we're half an hour beyond the point where I normally brush her teeth and give her a treat. So she literally started hitting the cabinet where I've got the doggy toothpaste at the top. And I wasn't thinking, I had not prepared for this possibility of the dog getting pissed off that I'm not brushing her teeth. Literally, I heard the cabinet going, Sasha, not right now. No, we got to wait. But sorry, I was on a roll here and she made me forget. As far as, like the protests and people's, So, I don't get it. I don't get why people are in the streets. I don't get why they're so upset about it. I get why Arab Americans would be. I get why Palestinian Americans would be. My Muslim Americans would be. Why every other American who has no connection, I could understand why you'd care. Sure. Right. I can't understand why you'd be livid and like some of the people talking to me who have been just like livid. That I don't get because this isn't your fight. So feel free to support them, but why would you take it so personally? And finally, when it's not a sister movement, meaning these guys are conservative. These guys are like America's religious right, which is fine, but they are religious right, So they don't agree with us on any issue. So why do you feel this kinship? I don't know. I'm fascinated by it. And again, just because they don't agree with us on issues doesn't mean you wouldn't support them. That's fine. Yeah, but that's not enough. I mean, because we're humans, that's not enough. What I mean is you don't do this on climate change, right? You don't do it on any other war or anything that's been happening, even Russia and Ukraine, right? We're not in the streets about Russia and Ukraine, and it's been horrible what's happening there. I don't know. Maybe. Thank you, Timothy. Anyway, I don't know. Thank you, Flower Lady. Again, I get why you care. I don't get why people care so angrily, but I don't know. No, but Dawn, I think it's legitimate though. I think people legitimately care, but there's a whole other element too. I mean, there's an element of the left that's the extreme left. They care, but they're nuts. I mean, it's the socialist left and all of that. That's a whole other issue. But I think there's a lot of people who are not that. When I say socialist, I mean American socialist, which is crazy, versus European. But that's a subset. That's not the entire movement. You know what I mean? I understand because they're nuts. They'd love to see Biden hurt because they want to destroy the Democratic Party. That's different. But the majority of the protesters, I don't think are necessarily that. I don't. Miss Super Chat. Okay. Cologranic family. Did you actually have a question? Is that what it was? I saw you posted something, but I didn't see, you didn't have a, aha. Okay. Let me scroll up. It's not showing your question. There it is. There it is. I see now. Okay. I didn't see that you followed up with a question after your thing. Do you think Hamas sees the opportunity to attack because the U.S. politics are in turmoil? That's interesting. Do you think something prompted it? I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't necessarily think that. They've been preparing supposedly for 2 years, So to that degree, mean, to that degree, nothing new. I don't think so. I don't think it was like, for example, I'm not convinced Hamas would come up with that. The Russians might. I mean, the Russians would be the ones to say, the American elections are coming up. The Americans are overstretched in Ukraine. Now might be a really nice time to stir things up. Yeah, the Russians would say it, but I'm not convinced that. I don't know. I'm not really convinced. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Do any of the Middle Eastern folks that are here, whether Israeli or Arab or other Middle East, does anybody have a sense of why Hamas did this now? Or was it just a matter of they've been preparing for 2 years and they were ready? Israeli politics with Netanyahu, was that part of it? I mean, why like October 7 and not 3 months ago, not 6 months from now? That's what I'm wondering. They were just ready. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of wondering. Yeah, that's interesting too, Deb, about the COVID thing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think it may just been they were ready. I think so. I think they were just ready. Some of the articles I read said they were preparing for 2 years. CNN had like satellite imagery and everything else that they were preparing for a long time. Yeah. Yeah. But it could have been Israeli politics too. Who knows? Oops, let me see here. What else, guys? What else? Oh, I'm happy to answer your questions. I don't recognize your name though. Have you been here long? I don't recognize I'm not sure I recognize your name. But I don't think I've seen don't think I've seen questions before. If you had, I'm so sorry. What else? Well, okay, I'm sorry. That is true. Yeah, Kelly just mentioned, I forgot to mention, one big reason was they were afraid of Saudi Arabia reaching kind of a peace deal with Israel, recognizing each other and all of that. And they wanted to stop that from happening. So that probably was the major reason why they attacked and why they did it now rather than waiting a year or whenever, right? So that's I've mentioned it before, but I forgot to mention it. That's a given. I mean, that's like the most important reason. I can't believe I forgot it. That would be the most important reason. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're on TikTok, Danny. Oh, okay. Although TikTok is harder though, because TikTok here. I'm sorry. I think you meant my videos. My videos, I can't read. There's too many comments on here. You mean? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joe. Only because the family thing caught my eye, and I was going to say I would have remembered that name. I think we're going to do. I am going to do presidential elections as we get closer. Yeah, there's no choice really. I mean, there's. I think. Well, first of all, I mean, as this goes on, we hope someday the war in Ukraine is over. Thank you, Peshez, or was it Peshez? Happy to be me, or Pichet maybe. But yeah, no, I'm gonna do the election stuff. Somebody asked the question about that earlier about the polls. There's some new polls out. They're weird. Some polls showing Biden like losing to Trump in like 5 or 6 of the key states. And I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, I really don't get it. There's something weird going on across the board. I mean, I saw some woman, like the New York Times had some woman they were interviewing, and she's like, I think she might've been African. I think it was African-American, because they were talking about African-Americans and Latinos. And she was saying, actually, no, I'm going to read this quote to you. You're not going to paraphrase it. I will read you the quote, because the quote sounded fake. It was such a bizarre quote. Hold on here. Let me find this. Like I said, it was just a bizarre quote. Thank you, Corporal. Beep, beep, beep. Yes. Okay, here we go. She goes, this is from the New York Times, this woman they interview. I think, like I said, I think she was like a 30-year-old African-American woman, I think. She worries about a total erosion of democracy under a second Trump administration, but she's also frustrated with Mr. Biden and his party for failing to tackle rising costs that have not kept pace with her income and for not providing help with her student loan debt. Okay, so she's worried that Donald Trump may eliminate democracy in America, but she's also upset that Biden didn't wipe out her student loans. And you're like, seriously, lady? Seriously? I mean, seriously? I read that stuff and I just want to like slap somebody. It makes no sense to me at all. Absolutely no sense. Especially, okay, the student loan thing, I was never a fan of because honestly, it always struck me like I want free money. And there's a constituency of young people that want free stuff. I get it, but it pisses me off. I don't like that kind of crap. But put that aside. Biden gave you your damn free loans, and the Republicans went to court and struck it down. It was the Republicans that killed it, but they're holding Biden to blame because they didn't get their free money. And it's like, what the hell do you want? So no, but the polls are real, and you've got to take it into account. But it doesn't make sense to me. Again, how anybody could vote for Donald Trump? Thank you, Super Hornet. How anybody could vote for Donald Trump after what he did last time? I don't get it. And the Biden thing, it's like he's old, yeah, and he's boring. Okay, and so you're gonna support Donald Trump? The other day said he's considering invoking the Insurrection Act his first day of office so he can basically declare martial law and arrest anybody who's a protester. I mean, like, do people not understand how freaking crazy that is? But Joe Biden's boring and a little old. It's like, okay, but this is what happens. People want to watch maybe this is how democracies die. Again, guys, it's freaking Star Wars. Democracies die with thunderous applause is how they die. I mean, people are going, yay, Donald Trump tried to overthrow the government and he saddled up to neo-Nazis. Yay. And he stole more money than any president in history through his children. Yay. Let's have him do it again. He wants to deport all Palestinians. Woo. Right? Like, this is great. People are insane. Absolutely insane. And no woman will ever have an abortion again. Yay! But Joe Biden's boring. He's boring and he's old. Okay, well, enjoy. When you're deported from the country, you can't have more abortions or anything else because Joe Biden's old. No, so that's how I feel about it. But again, people are out of their minds. But also, what we're seeing is, thank you, Laura, we are seeing a reflection of what goes on internationally. That lunatic in Brazil for a while, whoever the hell it was, the previous guy who was a nut, Bolsonaro, Orban in Hungary, Le Pen doing better in France, right? The crazies doing better in Sweden too, the Swedish Democrats. I mean, we are seeing these crazy. Biden sold the White House for cash. You're out of your mind. I mean, no, because I realize, like, politically, if you're a Republican, you got to go after the guy. But Biden's like so clean, it's not even funny. His son's a piece of trash, clearly. But give me a break, No, if you support Donald Trump, you don't care about clean government and you don't care about corruption. I mean, I really do. I hate to sort of go there because I try not to get into politics in this, but this man wants to declare martial law his first day in office. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, let's be nice about it because, la, la, la. Insane. So yes, enough of that lunatic. Let's talk about nicer stuff like Israel and Gaza or Ukraine. I mean, yeah, the Biden thing is just ridiculous. It is, though. He's too old. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this not fun enough for you, this presidency? I mean, where did I get the crackpot idea? Donald Trump. Check out the news today. Google the Insurrection Act. You're not going to be pleased. Well, you might be pleased, but most people aren't going to be pleased. Sasha, you're driving me nuts. Cut it out. She's at the door whining to go play with her friends again. Hey! Drives me bonkers because she sits there and it's like everything. She picked up the whine from lately and it's been happening a lot. Thank you, Booty. In the last month or two, everything's a whine to make me feel bad. Like, yeah, I did see Courtney. I didn't see the videos. Here's the thing. And this is difficult for me. I don't know whether to trust the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and that's the problem. I really don't. They've been releasing some videos. They're releasing photos showing tunnels outside, like basically the Hamas setting up tunnels outside hospitals and things. I don't know whether to believe it. I mean, Hamas, forget it. I don't trust anything Hamas says. But I don't know if I trust the IDF, and I certainly don't trust Netanyahu. And that's part of the problem here, you know? I mean, I really wish, I suspect they're real. I suspect, because I don't trust Netanyahu. And I just, there's, honestly, you guys need like a new government people can trust. I just don't trust him. I really do. I trust Hamas much less, obviously. I know some people tell me, and I don't know Israeli politics enough. Some people tell me they trust the IDF much more than Netanyahu because of the institution. But as an outsider looking at this, who's, not unsympathetic, I look and go, I don't know. I mean, because I will say this, Israel, I mean, who was it? The Bahrainis today made some stupid comment about how, oh, well, obviously Israel's bombing the hospitals because they want to bomb hospitals and kill innocent people. No, they're not. That's not why Israel didn't bomb a hospital because they said, hey, let's bomb a hospital and we can kill lots of babies. That wasn't the calculus. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't screw up. Maybe they did, right? But it wasn't some guy saying, let's bomb babies. Oh, babies, good. That was not it. And stuff like that from the Bahrainis doesn't help. But I haven't seen it, the movie. Well, the Hamas horrors? No, I've not. I've seen clips, obviously. I believe the Hamas horror stuff, that I believe. But I think it is very difficult. And I think this is a problem for Israel, and their government better figure this out, which is you need to get this stuff, whether it's to some third party independent people who can look at it and tell us it's real and tell us it's true. That would be very helpful, because I'm looking at it going, maybe, maybe. I mean, well, I will say the same thing. Like, I trust Ukraine. I trust the Ukrainian government. Well, it depends. I trust the Ukrainian government, but I don't trust them for like the number of dead. Like, oh, this many Russian soldiers have died. I'm like, maybe, right? But I trust the Ukrainian government overall because, generally speaking, the Ukrainian government has not lied. So I know we've got a track record with the Ukrainian government. They just haven't lied that much. So that, not lied, even gotten things wrong. Generally speaking, they've gotten it right. Well, 1, 2, 3, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, well, yeah, exactly, the corruption. The Russians have an even much greater corruption than the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainian government for the last year and a half has pretty much told the truth. So I trust them when they say things because they don't generally lie. I don't know enough about the IDF, but I will say I don't trust Netanyahu. I really don't. People have rushed to the nuclear site in Israel. No, I don't even know what, or the nuclear site. I mean, they've got 100 nukes probably. There's got to be more than one nuclear site, I would think. Anyway, what else, guys? I don't know. I mean, Flying Medic says, do you think the court of public opinion will eventually backfire or come to hurt Israel's goal? I mean, there's multiple elements here in terms of public opinion. One, there are folks on the left who don't like Israel and they like the Palestinians and they're outraged. Okay. That's one. The bigger question isn't them because they're loud and I know they care, but they're loud and they're not the majority in this country, at least. The bigger question is what will happen to people in the middle? People on the right, not so good. They're going to be pro-Israel no matter what. People in the middle, what do they think? And what will they think? Right. And will they see these civilian deaths and disagree and not support Israel eventually? Or, as I said, part of the problem is at the same time, the anti-Semitism has been out of control. And again, I'm not even getting into this stuff during the show with you guys, but I follow this shit every day. The amount of anti-Semitic acts against Jews worldwide is out of control. The stuff against Arabs, or Muslims, there was the second one that happened. The one was that, and it was pretty horrific though, that boy in Chicago getting murdered, but it was one. And it was horrific, but it was one. But it was very bad. Another student got threatened or something and the guy got arrested. That was the second one. The anti-Jewish stuff, it's every day. Protesters in London, they're not protesting the Israelis. They're protesting Jewish businesses. Protesters in Canada, protesting Jewish diners. Jewish. They're not protesting Israelis. They're looking for Jews to protest. Okay. This has been happening and it's out of freaking control. I mean, that's pissing me off. It is, and it's the stuff against Arabs. Oh no. And I'm glad, frankly, that there isn't, because there was also a great chance that people could have turned against Muslims in this country, because we've got a history of doing that with like 9/11, right? That has not happened, which is good. People have not turned against Muslims. But again, what Hamas did was a perfect setup for people to demonize Arabs, and they didn't. It was a perfect setup for people to protest Arabs, and they didn't, and Muslims, and they're not. They're doing it to Jews, and they're literally doing it to Jews. In France, forget it. In France, they're writing death to Jews and stuff on the side of Jewish kindergartens, like for the place little babies go to school. I mean, crazy shit, guys. It's all over the place. And that, I mean, it pisses me off, but also that has the potential to hurt the Palestinian cause, put it that way. Because people see that and they go, and again, the protests in DC, honestly, they looked a little crazy to me. I didn't like it. People don't protest that way here. You don't go to the White House fence and try to knock it down. That shit is crazy shit that we don't do here. That stuff doesn't go over well, but let's see. Maybe it won't bother people. I don't know. Right? But it's hard to say. So, I mean, it is possible that this stuff will backfire on the pro-Palestinian folks, because honestly, they look like protests in the Middle East and nobody wants to see that in Washington, D.C. But it's also possible that the civilian deaths will just make people fed up with Israel. That's possible too. You know, it can go either way. It really can go either way. Well, the synagogue leader was killed in Detroit, but wasn't she the one that we don't know why yet? I don't know if anything ever came of that. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. I just don't know that anything came of that one, you know? Yeah, they defaced the White House. They defaced the frickin' fence in the front of the White House. Yeah. You don't put paint all over the fence in front of the White House. I'm just saying, we don't do that shit here. You just don't. You know, yeah, but the Detroit one, I hadn't seen a follow-up. At least initially, they didn't know what had caused why she was killed. So I always want to be careful about that, you know? Well, I mean, David's saying Israel doesn't really care what people think about us. As I was saying at the beginning of the show, I don't know if you were here, I could understand why. You know, thank you, Chef. If your country was set up because you assume the rest of the world hates you and wants to kill you, you're not really influenced by the fact that, hey, guess what? The rest of the world hates you and wants to kill you. Like, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, the whole world's pissed at Israel. Yeah, they call that Monday in Israel. You know what I mean? Of course, the whole world's pissed at Israel. The whole world hates Israel. So if you're Israeli, you're like, which also doesn't help. I mean, actually, that worries me too. Again, I think these protests, a lot of them have been too crazy. And not just the protests, but all the anti-Semitic stuff. Frankly, you're helping Israel, because all the anti-Semitism has shown Israel that they're right, that everybody fucking hates them. That it's not about Hamas. It's not about, you know, it's not about Palestinians. It's about hating Israel. It's about hating Jews. And once you do that, then they go, well, if you hate Jews and you want to kill us, then screw it. You know, it's bad. It's just bad on all sides. It really is. I just, you know, anyway, I don't support a ceasefire. No, because I think a ceasefire is literally Hamas. Let's kill Israelis. Israel, don't fight back. Don't fight back. Hamas needs to be taken out. And if the Arab world wants to get together and figure out how to take out Hamas, that'd be great. But also, ceasefire, why aren't you guys just promoting that Hamas surrender? That would end this. Promote that Hamas turn over the hostages and surrender. That would end this. That would end this like that. Nobody's talking about that. I mean, the thing is, ceasefire is like a war is ceasefire. Ceasefire is not mass. For example, 9/11, right? Thank you for the leaves there. Like, they killed us at 9/11. If you proposed a ceasefire like 3 weeks later, it would have been like, well, you just killed thousands of our people. And of course you don't want me to fight back, you know? So no, I just think a ceasefire is again, being promoted by lots of people who just don't like. I would actually be very curious, a lot of you out there, although it's a chicken and egg question, folks who are siding with the Palestinians on this. I'm curious if any of you actually like Israel. You know, now it's a bit of a chicken and egg because you might not like Israel because Israel has done this stuff a lot, right? So that would be a valid point if you said, well, I don't because they're always doing this. Fair enough. But I feel a lot of animus, as we call it in the law. Animus meaning hatred, anger. And that's what worries me with a lot of this shit too, you know? But I don't know. But again, I understand why people feel this way because if, I could understand why you don't like what you're seeing happening in Gaza. That's totally understandable to me, but anyway, thank you, Dawn. I haven't seen that one in a while. Thank you for that. No, it's a good question. Evie says to be honest, I hate what Hamas did to Israel on the 7th, but Israel's response has gotten to a point that I'm wondering if it's gone way more into revenge than response. I don't know. Thank you, Kologranic or Dina. Oh, not Danny. You said Dina. I was saying Danny. Anyway, what else, guys? Anything else? We could do a couple more questions. I mean, it's 7:30 already. Or I could show you my video of the mama gorilla with her baby gorilla from the zoo today. That was really adorable. That's happier than this. I don't think revenge is what you want, though. I mean, sorry, somebody says revenge will be justified. I mean, the thing is, revenge may not be justified because it depends what you mean. I mean, revenge is not let's kill Palestinian civilians because they killed our civilians, right? That's not good. Also, I would say revenge as policy isn't really what you should do, right? Your policy should be you're trying to achieve something. It shouldn't just be, well, it feels good. It should be, we want to, like you said, we want to destroy Hamas. We want to take them out of power. We want to take their weapons away. By the way, one other thing Israel is doing, and kind of nobody mentioned this, but at the beginning, the concern was that Israel, by Hamas being able to do this, they proved that Israel was no longer invincible, that Israel was weak, that the Israeli Defense Forces really weren't that good, right? Israel was vulnerable. Well, and again, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but Israel just showed all of its neighbors what it can do if anybody F's around with Israel. And that did have an impact. Let's put it that way. Iran, Syria, Jordan wouldn't do anything. Egypt probably wouldn't, right? But it showed them that Israel will get you, and they'll get you 100 times worse than you got them, which is the way it always was. Thank you, Sean. And I mean, but my point isn't to say my point is that's a reason to do it. You don't do it for revenge. You do it for actual policy reasons, right? As I said, because you want to create deterrence. You want your enemies to know you will do this to them too. You want to destroy Hamas. You want to take them out of power. You want to take out their weapons. Those are all reasons you might do it, but you don't do it just for revenge. No, I don't think so. I think that's a bad reason for governments to do things. Do you think TikTok being owned by China is having an effect on Gen Z? Valerie asks, I don't know. I mean, I will say the good thing now is I don't notice it on TikTok. I noticed the beginning of the Ukraine thing, forget it. That was nonstop with TikTok censoring. Nonstop. It was bad. They've been pretty good lately. I had one video TikTok pulled as this was great. Misinformation. I had a video updating people on the children that the Russians had kidnapped from Ukraine. Mind you, the children Russian kidnapped are the reason Putin is facing an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court in The Hague because of the children he's stolen. I did an update on that story from the news, and TikTok pulled it as misinformation. I resubmitted the appeal, and the appeal was withheld. It's misinformation. I'm like, there's literally The Hague indicting Putin over this story. So there's still some weird shit at TikTok, depending who you get. But generally speaking, I've not noticed a problem in terms of the China stuff like that, in terms of the content. No. Personally, I'm saying, which is good, obviously. What else, guys? Anything else? Oh, I don't want to give a recap, Magical. Ugh, I'll do a quick recap. Fine. All right. Only because like with this, there's always so much news, but I can do quick headline recaps. I mean, I'm not sure what else to say about the hostages. I mean, Hamas still has 240 hostages or so. They also have a lot of captives. They've got, don't forget this. There were 5,000 to 7,000 foreigners in Gaza that Hamas is refusing to let leave. You know, that's bad. So those are additional hostages. You know, as an Israeli, you mean I'm not, do you concern about Hamas in the USA? I mean, people worry about terrorism. Yes. Always worrying about that anyway. Fortunately, you know, we've been pretty successful at stopping it, but sure, my guess is, though, we may have also told Iran the same thing. You know, there's terrorism in the U.S. and we're going to hold Iran responsible. Would be my guess. All right, let me go through the headline highlights of the headlines of stuff we covered today. Israeli Defense Forces said it hit more than 450 Hamas targets and captured additional territory inside Gaza. Hamas claims 10,000 civilians or people have been killed. More than 9,000 rockets have been fired at Israel by Hamas since October 7th, according to the Israeli government. Secretary Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, conducting shuttle diplomacy, Turkey, Middle East over the weekend. Biden talked to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to talk about the possibility of a tactical pause, but nothing was agreed. In Rafah, the crossing in southern Gaza, more of the several thousand foreigners were released by Hamas. Only several thousand were not released, though, but they're holding several thousand, basically. I think it was 50 maybe were released. The Palestinian Red Crescent says 93 trucks of humanitarian aid were able to cross today. Hamas's armed wing in Lebanon launched 16 missiles towards 2 Israeli cities. That was considered escalation and not good. The U.S. military says a guided missile submarine has arrived in the Middle East to basically send Iran the message not to screw around. U.S. Central Command said, so that's the same story. Ukraine. I then talked overall about Bakhmut and Avdiivka, how Avdiivka fighting there, the Russians have been pretty much at a stalemate. I mean, they're not doing that well. And then near Donetsk as well, the Russians lost a lot of tanks in the last few days, which was good. Then overall, we talked about whether the war is getting into an attrition, which basically is a bit of a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine, and an analysis by Michael Clark at Sky News, who said that he does think, though, for the next 18 months, it still favors Ukraine. Even though it's a war of attrition, Ukraine still could have some good successes. Zelensky disagreed with his top general, who said that the war is at a stalemate. Zelensky says he thinks it is not. The Ukrainians took out, we believe, a new Russian cruise missile carrier, a ship in a Crimean port this weekend using cruise missiles. Russia is waiting for temperatures to drop below freezing before launching massive airstrikes again on Ukraine's energy system, the Ukrainians think. There was a horrible attack this weekend on Ukrainian troops by the Russians, killing 19 or 20 soldiers at an award ceremony that the Ukrainians were stupid enough to hold, because the Russians then found out and said, let's kill them all. So there's criminal investigations of that going on now. Large Russian losses in Vuhledar in eastern Ukraine near Donetsk. That's good news. Sweden's NATO bid, by Blinken, our Secretary of State, went to Turkey, talked to them about it, said he thinks there will be forward movement, whatever that means. Ukraine has launched mass production of kamikaze drones with a maximum range of 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles. That's good. An assistant to Ukraine's commander-in-chief Zaluzhny was killed by a bomb in his home. That's a little weird. Wagner Group is now training with Kadyrov's Chechens. Slovakia's prime minister, who's anti-Ukraine and pro-Russian, said he will let Slovakian companies sell arms to Ukraine if they want to. France's oldest arms manufacturer has signed a $38 million contract to supply Ukraine with rifles. Oh, and then finally, Zelensky offered Trump to visit Ukraine. So that's interesting too. Whether Trump will do it, we'll see. I can't think of Trump it might make Trump look presidential. Who knows? But all right, guys, let's call it quits. It's 7:45. I was considering Discord, but not after an hour and 45 minutes. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to probably do some TikTok videos right now. I probably should. It's been a long day, but I need to do some videos. All right, guys. Thank you, mods. Thank you guys for the gifts. I know yawning. Am I yawning? I don't even realize I'm yawning. Thank you, Jeremy. Join me tomorrow, 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock Eastern time, US. This is our time changed in the US. So now we're at normal time here. This is the normal time. So 6 o'clock Eastern time, Washington, DC. And see you guys tomorrow. Otherwise, all right. Thank you all. All right. Good night. Good night. I am going to yawn again. Now you're right. Oh, man. Oh.